On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse Q&A, we discussed weaponized incompetence, when I can't becomes a control tactic. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and today we will be discussing weaponized incompetence. Before we get to weaponized incompetence, if you want to join our newsletter, we have a really informative newsletter. And with our newsletter, you get a downloadable workbook from our Survivor Story episode that occurs that week. So go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com to join that newsletter. And today, everything involving weaponized incompetence. Hopefully this little episode will be useful to everyone and why this matters to survivors. And this comes up in our Survivor Stories a lot. Even though people do not have the language for it at first, they're trying to figure out what is going on. And many survivors describe feeling like they're doing everything in the relationship, managing the house, managing the kids, managing the finances, schedules, emotions, emotional labor. And when they ask their partner to help, they hear things like, I tried, but I messed it up. Or, you're just better at that stuff. Or, I don't know how to do it right. And eventually it just feels like it's easier for you to just take over. And over time, these taking over of these things like turns into exhaustion. And we've heard it so many times in our Survivor Story episodes. And a lot of people don't realize that the name for this thing that the abuser is doing is called weaponized incompetence, and it is used in controlling relationships, abusive relationships. And so what is weaponized incompetence? And weaponized incompetence is when someone pretends they can't do a task or consistently does it poorly so that the responsibility shifts to their partner. And it could look like confusion or forgetting or doing things halfway, messing things up. But the outcome is always the same. One person in the relationship will end up carrying the load of everything. And a survivor once shared with me that every time they asked their partner to do laundry, they'd actually shrink the clothes. They'd mix the colors, or things would just get half finished, not done well. They might put it in, they didn't leave it in long enough, it doesn't even dry completely. And, the next day when you go in and you look, it still smells. You got to redo the whole entire thing over and over again. And at first, this person thought it was just careless. But after a while, she just stopped asking. And it was easier for this person to just do it themselves. And that is the point of everything. It's not that they can't do it. It's that the abuser benefits when they don't do it. And we hear like things all the time, like abusive partners saying that they don't understand finances, so now you have to do the finances. We have partners who, forget appointments all the time, or they miss these things, so you kind of have to do these things for them, especially when it comes to things revolving around the kids. And partners who always say, I try, but somehow I always mess things up. Meanwhile, while these things are happening, if you take a step back, you might say, like, well, in the other parts of their lives, it seems like they're functional. How do they get things done at work, etc.? Things like that, where you start to kind of see what's going on. And we had one survivor that once told me that her partner claimed that he couldn't even schedule a doctor's appointment online. But somehow he can research electronics online. This person can manage work deadlines. They can play complicated games, online games, different types of games. In my life, I've had someone ask me to do specific things, I'm always wondering why. I think this person can do this by themselves. But the interesting thing was, I know that they knew how to use really complicated things because I knew that they had to do those things at work. Pretty archaic things where today we kind of take for granted that we have computers that work the way they do, and just a lot of prompts in this old system. And so I knew that they could do those things. And speaking to this survivor, this person knew that they could do those things as well, but yet for something very basic like a doctor's appointment, somehow they just couldn't do it. Don't know how to do it. Pretty simple thing, stuff that's online. And another survivor told me when it came to cleaning that the partner would just clean so poorly that they just have to redo everything, or they left dishes half clean, like not the whole plate was clean, so they have to redo that. Bathroom barely wiped, so you have to kind of come in. They said they did work, but they just went in there and they rubbed here or there. Oh, I'm just bad at it. Or this bathroom looks so dirty anyway, because sometimes you get those apartments where it's kind of dirty, and even when it's clean, it's dirty. That's kind of their excuse. Well, look at why it looks anyway. Even when it's clean, it's still dirty. So that's the way it looks. And eventually people just stop asking for their abusive partner to do these things because they're weaponizing incompetence. And we've heard these stories many times on our show. And often it starts pretty small, but over time, the abuse victim becomes eventually the planner, a caretaker, a problem solver, and a manager of life in a lot of ways. And in abusive relationships, weaponized incompetence often connects to entitlement and control. And many survivors notice that their partner believes certain tasks were beneath them. Sometimes it's like childcare and house care. And over time, this creates exhaustion, but it also keeps the abuse victim busy. And the busier an abuse victim is, the more they're constantly overwhelmed, the less energy you have to really kind of step back and question what is actually going on. So weaponized incompetence is two things. One, they're not doing a thing that they should be doing. And two, it's creating so much extra work that you're so busy that it's hard to then question things because you're exhausted and you're just kind of going and going. You're in the forest at this point and unable to see fully what is actually happening or question what is actually happening. And this becomes an interesting part of coercive control, using weaponized incompetence as it is a form of control. It's not just about avoiding work. It's about controlling how much time, energy, and freedom a survivor or abuse victim has. And we hear this a lot in our survivor story episodes, when one aspect of everything control is going on and the other person is free to do whatever they want to do. So what is a genuine struggle and what is manipulation when it comes to this? And this is really important because a lot of the time abuse victims and survivors often second guess themselves. And not everyone who struggles with a task is weaponizing incompetence. And the difference usually comes down to effort and change. And genuine struggle looks like someone who's trying to learn, wants feedback, improves over time, might be gradual, slowly, and takes responsibility for what has happened. Where weaponized incompetence looks like repeating the same mistakes, no improvement, avoidance, and relief when you take over, not taking responsibility for anything at all, not really trying to learn. And one survivor that we talked to offered to teach their partner how to cook. Refusal. Offered to sit down and go over their finances together to show them how to do it. Not interested. So this is like no effort to grow, but it is only an effort to avoid and escape responsibility. And if somebody truly can't do something, they usually kind of want to get better at doing it. And if someone benefits from not doing something, for an abuser, if they benefit from not doing something, they won't try to learn to do that thing. So over time, these things become, I'll handle this one, to all of a sudden, I handle everything. And survivors might feel like they're not the partners anymore, that they're not in a partnership, that they've become caretakers, that they've become managers, that they become parents, which is one that we hear a lot, that all of a sudden I'm in a relationship with, I have an extra kid. I have another teenager that lives in my household. That's kind of how it feels a lot of the time for abuse survivors. And over the years, this mental load becomes overwhelming, and it's not just tasks, it's just like kind of remembering everything, and then you're exhausted, and it becomes harder to push back over time as these things become normalized. Once these things become normalized, it's harder to push back because you've been doing it for so long. And this is how an imbalance becomes normal. It kind of starts to slowly build. You take it on once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, until eventually you're doing everything. How do you start to push back on that once that starts happening? Not easy. So, why do survivors adapt? And people ask, like, why didn't you stop doing everything? But there's trauma bonding going on, there's conditioning going on, and it's also safety plays a big role here as well. And survivors, victims learn, if I don't do it, it won't get done. If I push back, it becomes a fight. If I complain, I'll get punished emotionally. Some people are met with anger. Some people are met with a silent treatment. Some people are met with guilt and blame. We hear that a lot on our survivor stories. And the abuse victim at that point will adapt to what is going on. They'll adapt to the safety aspect of things. And it's not because they wanted to adapt, but it's just the safe thing to do. And some might actually hope for change, and that gets added into the mix. And then you get, the sunk cost fallacy, your years invested with this kind of going on. And then there's those breadcrumbing moments where maybe my partner did help just enough to kind of keep things going. So this kind of cycle keeps in place. This weaponized incompetence cycle keeps in place in this corner of abuse amongst probably a bunch of other different types of abuses that are going on. So when it comes to weaponized incompetence, it's really not about chores. It's about power. It's about control. It's responsibility, control of time, control of your energy. And when one person is consistently benefiting from being incapable, that is not accidental. And it's a dynamic we see across our survivor stories all the time. And if this resonated with you, this episode, discussing weaponized incompetence, it doesn't mean that you're weak. It just means that you've adapted to a situation where someone else wasn't carrying their share. It was a manipulation, and it's by design. And you're not alone in this situation at all. So many people are dealing with weaponized incompetence. We've recently done an article on our website about weaponized incompetence. We'll leave that in the show notes. And, take what you will from this episode, whatever resonated with you. Hopefully you feel a little bit more understood. And for those of you that couldn't figure out what was going on, hopefully we put words to what's happening with you right now within your relationship, if it's currently going on or if it happened in the past and you're still trying to figure out what's going on. Hopefully this episode was helpful. And that's it for today's little Q&A on weaponized incompetence. And I hope you have a good night.